Hi, guys. We're going to continue today with more information about imaginary numbers. Specifically, we're going to talk about the properties of the number I. Remember, I is a number. The definition of the number I is the square root of -1. I is imaginary because the square root of a negative number does not exist in this world. It just can't happen. But we still want to be able to work with it, and that's why we invented complex numbers. Today, we're going to explore what happens when you raise the number I to a power. Now, briefly yesterday, I talked about how if you square the number I, you get -1. I is the only number in the world that when you square it will give you a negative answer. Essentially, what is happening is you are squaring a square root, and those two things will cancel each other out, leaving you with the number that was on the inside, -1. But let's keep going. Let's try to figure out what I to the third is. Okay. Now, if you remember your rules for exponents, you can find an exponent, I to the third, by splitting it up and having two other exponents that add together to make the number 3. So let's do 1 and 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. So I can rewrite I to the third as I to the second and I to the first, since 2 plus 1 is 3. And I know what these two things are. I know that I squared is -1, and I to the first is just the number I. And so I've figured out now that I to the third is actually equal to -I. Anytime you raise I to a power, you'll be able to figure out a number that it's equal to that does not have an exponent on it. So let's try I to the fourth. So we're going to take I to the fourth and we're going to split it into two number i's with exponents to add up to 4. So you could either do 3 and 1, or I think it's easier to do 2 plus 2. So I'm going to split this up into I squared times I squared. And I squared is just -1, so this can be replaced with -1 times -1, and that is +1. Okay, so now we've done the first 4. Let's keep going. Let's see what happens next. So let's do I to the fifth. Now, the really cool thing that starts happening around I to the fifth is that you can use I to the fourth, which is essentially just the number 1, and then multiply it with, I to the first. So, because 4 plus 1 is 5, right? So we can change it to I to the fourth times I to the first, which is essentially just 1 times I, and we get I. I to the fifth is the same as just regular old I. And I to the sixth, we can also use I to the fourth, which is just 1. So it's actually not going to change anything. And then 4 plus 2 is 6. So I'm going to do I to the fourth times I squared, which is essentially 1 times -1, and I get -1, which is the same thing I got for I squared. And this pattern keeps going. For 7, I'm going to do 4 and 3, which will essentially just be the same as what I to the third was, because 1 times anything stays the same. And for 8, I'm going to do 4 plus 4, right? So I to the fourth times I to the fourth, that's 1 times 1, that's just 1. And this pattern of the first 4 answers that we got, it repeats forever. So I to a power will always end up being one of these 4 things: I, -1, -I, or +1. That's it. Those are the only answers that you can get for these problems. So the trick is going to be trying to figure out which of those 4 answers it is. Now they do go in a cycle, so they just keep rotating over and over and over again. And it's always, that pattern of 4. So it's going to have to do with the number 4 to figure out the answer. So let's go ahead and try to figure out some bigger exponents. And we don't want to just kind of like count through 4s. We'll figure out a mathematical way to do it. First of all, you do have to memorize the order that these are in because it's always going to be in the same order. So if you get them out of order, then you're not going to get the right answer. So there's a little song that we can sing, or I guess it's more of a little chant that we can do to help us remember what order these are in. And so the chant goes, I won, losers in the middle. So it's I, 1, and then the 2 middle numbers are negative. Okay, so when you're doing these problems, before you start, you want to like write out the cycle of 4 things so that you remember what they are and that you have them in the right order. All right, let's find I to the 25th. Now, in reality, if you really, really super wanted to, you could count to 25. You could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and go all the way up to 25. That might take some time though. So instead, what we can do is we can divide the exponent by 4, since it's a cycle of 4, right? Since there's 4 numbers in the cycle. So we can take the exponent and divide by 4, and the remainder will tell us which position we should look at. So 25 divided by 4, 4 goes into 25 6 times with a remainder of 1. If you're using a calculator, right, calculators don't usually tell us the remainder. So it's actually going to say like 6.25, right? But 25 is 1/4. And so that's where I got the remainder of 1 from. Okay. So we're looking at the remainder. And the remainder tells us which number we should look at. So if my remainder is 1, then I'm going to look at the first number in the list, and I'm going to say that I to the 25th is equal to I. And that's it. That's what you do. So you take your exponent, you divide by 4. The remainder will tell you which position to look at. Let's try one more together. I to the 208th power. Now on this one, we really don't want to count to 208. That's going to take forever. So instead, we're going to take the 208 and we're going to divide it by 4. Again, we're dividing by 4 because there are 4 numbers in our list. Now, 208 is evenly divisible by 4. It's 52 with no remainder. So that means when we typed it into our calculator, there was no decimal. Since it is evenly divisible by 4, that means that we're going to use the 4th term in the cycle, because that would not have a remainder, right? 4 divided by 4 is just 1. And so I'm going to use the 4th number, which is 1. And so I to the 208th is actually just the number 1. All right. So we did a little chant to remember the order. I have a little chart that will hopefully help you remember which one is which. And then, I'll give you a couple to try on your own if you want to before we go to our homework. And this is all we're learning today. So hopefully this was not too difficult. So here's our little chart, and you want to, copy this into your notes. And it says, when you divide by 4 and the remainder is 1, then the answer is I. So this is how you read the chart. When you divide by 4 and the remainder is 1, then the answer is I. So this was the remainder, and then this is the answer. And then don't forget, when you divide by 4 and the remainder is 1, that means that your calculator gave you a decimal of 0.25, because that's 1/4. Okay? All right, so when you divide by 4 and the remainder is 2, then the answer is -1. And to get a remainder of 2, you would get on your calculator 0.5, right? Because 2/4 is the same as 1/2. Okay. All right. When you divide by 4 and the remainder is 3, then the answer is negative I and 3/4. That's the decimal 0.75. Okay. And finally, when you divide by 4 and the remainder is 0, there is no remainder. That means you got a whole number answer. Then the answer is 1. Right? So this would be a whole number if you're using your calculator. Okay, so hopefully this little chart will help you remember which one is which. And then if you want to, you can pause the video right now and just try these 4 before you start tonight's homework, because I am going to give you the answers to these 4 problems. So that way you can check and see if you're doing it correctly before you jump into the homework assignment. So go ahead and pause. And hopefully you have your answers, and let's go ahead and check them now. So the answer to number 1 is -1. That means when I divided, I got a decimal of 0.5. The answer to number 2 is 1. That means that 64 is evenly divisible by 4. The answer to number 3 is -I. That means that when I divided, I got 0.75 as part of my answer. We don't care about the whole number part. We're just worried about the decimal part. And number 4, the answer is I, which means that I got 0.25 when I divided it in my calculator. All right, guys, this concludes today's lesson.